Namaste, 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 everybody, whether you're here now or indeed listening to the recording. Welcome to Deep Dialogues. And we have a very remarkable gentleman sitting here, Matías De Stefano, who has been on before. We share something in common, our remembrance of Atlantis. And so Matías very kindly has given us this blessing. We're recording this on December the 27th. He has been on before, as I was saying, and our first recording, we'll make sure that you have easy access to it on this wonderful platform of deep dialogues. Yes, it's a deep dialogue, not a deep dive, but a deep dialogue. Um, this is a platform where I have remarkable people like Matthias, leading global soul stewards who have something very specific to say about the remarkable changes that are taking place within us and without us, and how we can be part of that change and certainly maintain ourselves through a time of what could be described as crumbling, meaning that the establishments on the outside of us are going through a mighty metamorphosis. And indeed, the subject of today, which is right in the very core of my heart that Matthias has voted us into, is alchemy. So welcome, 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 brother. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, and here from Atlantis. I'm right here, so
Please,
so
just tell us which island you're on.
I'm in Tenerife Island, in the Canary Islands, and I've been called to start here as many of my paths in my life related to Atlantis and the story of Atlantis being part of these islands. So yeah, I'm connected to it in this island, so I had to come.
And do you feel that the Canary Islands are the epicenter of what we can remember of Atlantis, as we, as it were, exhume all of those memories from deep within our bodies, as well as from the archaeology of islands like the one that you're on? Do you feel that that's the epicenter rather than going towards the Caribbean?
I think that that actually is not like the epicenter, but it's one of the most important places from that time, from where the Atlantean people started to spread. So if we take in count that the Atlantic Ocean was not the origin of humans, actually they moved from Africa and Middle East and Mediterranean Sea during the glaciation, the last glaciation. Um, so they started to move through the islands, and the closest to Africa and the Middle and the Mediterranean Sea are Madeira and the Canary Islands. So it's much easier for people to start navigating from here and then spreading to the other islands and settling in the other islands from here. So I wouldn't say it's the epicenter, but it was the place where they started to spread. So for me in my memories, the first navigators, the first people that started to touch different islands from Europe and Africa, they settled here before they actually created what we remember altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, as you describe this, there's a very gentle assumption, which is that the islands that we now see, in
Mm.
particularly the Canary Islands, were there all those thousands and thousands of years ago, and that's possibly not the case, is it? That we're dealing with islands now, but originally were probably the peaks of high mountain ranges, and
Yeah.
that much of the continent of Atlantis lies on the ocean floor.
Well,
That's why I
yeah,
was
it's
joking earlier about you putting on your aqua lungs and diving deep into the ocean to discover.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah,
Yeah, there are fascinating things that are hidden in the ocean in between Canary Islands and Madeira. That if you, I don't know if you have heard about some investigations that have been done that how there is like certain lines and
yeah,
structures in between these islands that are not natural, that they don't shape naturally. Um, so so for sure, at some point when the glaciation was in the highest peak, there was less water around circulating. It was more frozen in Europe and North America and Asia. So So the oceans were frozen in the north. So that, of course, makes the islands into just peaks of mountains instead of just volcanoes in the middle of the sea. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, there was probably a tremendous amount of geological eruption at the same time because of the tectonic plates shifting. Do you
Yeah.
have any particular information about the lines that have been found on the ocean floor? And maybe people are unfamiliar, so if you could just give us a point of definition of what we're talking about.
Well, I don't know the name of it on how they call it today, but if you go on Google Maps or just research about weird formations in between Madeira and Canary Islands, you will find out like this square structure. It looks like if it's like a cube from above, like it has many streets that are crossing. Um, but from my memories, all this region between Madeira, Canary Islands, the Azores, but mainly in this area, it was like the main congregation, like the point where everyone would enter to Africa and Europe or going out to the Americas. So for sure, um, in the navigation system of the planet, not just about boats, but about consciousness and about how the Atlanteans used to use the entire planet as a machine. For sure, there has been some buildings, structures that would align for all the boats or whatever it was to be aligned to that territory. So I assume that that place is kind of a portal where people would go harvest something, take some energy, like um, like for the Americas is the Bermuda Triangle, of course. So here is another one of those portals. Um, yeah, so that would be kind of the entrance of the world, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And do you see it as, when you talk of the portal, do you see it as a geometric form or principle?
Well, of
Like
course.
Bermuda Triangle, you know?
Yeah, well, the Bermuda Triangle is, of course, they call it a triangle because it's in between a certain area that is shaped with certain islands that have that position. Here, of course, it's not a triangle, but it's more like a square. So if you see it from above, it literally is like a square from above, like if someone built a city in a square shape. Um, but actually, it's too big to be a city, and I don't believe it was literally a city. What I remember about those places is that is the creation of a grid. So it's like a mapping for um, for the navigation of the entire planet. It's like a technology where you kind of can move in that area and you are actually traveling throughout the entire planet. So you don't have to actually be um, uh, I don't know, like going to different places, but being there, you can actually move your pieces. Let's say it's like a board um, for navigation. And when I say navigation, it's not about boats. It's navigation. I mean the energy of the planet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that opens many, many questions, of course.
Yeah.
But, and which we'll get to in a moment. How did they travel? You know, because we're talking largely about what we today call astral travel or out of body experiences of traveling, of how consciousness in total, not just this, but the whole holistic nature of consciousness was used in a certain way. So, what was the internal technology that they had, which I'd like to get to? But just to rest on the point that you've just shared with us. So, the influence of the square, which is interesting in sacred geometry and what it appertains to, what it means. Of course, I'm assuming that you're saying that their definition of that their awareness of that arose from the very natural tectonic plates and seismic lines that were already inherent within Mother Earth.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and then they literally defined what that was all about so that they could utilize the
Hmm.
power those energies are all about. Um, the If you were to describe the state of Gaia at that time,
Hmm.
this is a tricky one because, of course, Gaia lives within her own hypersensitivity all the time. It's
Yeah.
just our perception of her is colored because of our own density. But if you were to speak of the Gaia during those times, and I suppose we're going back, what, 15, 20,000 years ago
Hmm.
and more, how would you describe the Gaia? What sort of condition was she in?
Well, I guess that um, to understand this and to compare it with something more relatable, I would say we have to think about when someone goes to sleep or when someone is trying to wake up. So there are certain cycles on the planet that takes thousands of years that requires for some resting. And a glaciation is kind of a resting actually for for the planet.
I just
Um,
Can I just hold on for you're saying glaciation, aren't you?
yes,
Yeah, so we're talking about the Ice Age.
the ice age. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Just want,
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
for those people who maybe don't speak English as their own native tongue, like
Oh
yourself.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
The
So
Ice Age.
ice age. Yeah. Um, so the ice age are moments in which the planet is trying to readjust. So what happened when you go to an ice age? What you are doing is to go to REM phase in the planet. So basically, everyone goes to sleep. So what happened? That the civilization is more connected to the dreaming, is more connected to the information that is in other realms. When it's hotter, you don't have time for that. When it's hotter, you have to just move around um, to work, to travel, to do so many things because it's hot. So you are not relaxing, let's say. But on winter, when you go inside, when you go to the dark, when everything gets cold, you have to go within. You have it's like the winter for the mind too. So the planet goes through those processes too. And when Gaia goes in that REM phase, which is an ice age, everything that is living on the planet starts a phase of sleeping, but also dreaming, which connects much more the consciousness of the planet. And that's why during the glaciation, the warm glaciation, um, when Atlantis and in that Neolithic period, they started to spread all over the planet. They spread through the dreaming, and that's why it was much easier for them to connect with the expansion of the mind. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I love the way you perceive things. it it's because it's rare, and I've sort of
That's right.
met only one or two people on the planet who I've had the great fortune of meeting that perceive in this way. So, are you suggesting, therefore, that the hibernation period, so to speak, what I call sleeping for God,
Hmm.
because we go deep, deep, deep into essence and our biocircuitry begins to change, are you suggesting that the dreaming that arose out of that deep level of hibernation was the predestination of what they then would accomplish physically?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the diaspora or the dispersal of the circuit board of Atlantis, when
Hmm.
we knew what was going to take place, that we moved into a deep level of dreaming, which led us to what the next stage of development would be from a geographical point of view.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. That's one of the reasons also why these ancient civilizations used to be around the 33 latitude and not northern, because they connected to the magnetical field that was created under the glaciation, under the ice. And so in between the tropics, 33 south and north. So around those areas, all the energy was flowing faster, which enables the people to connect more. Um, to connect more with the constellations, to connect more with the movement of our planet, and because the north and the south were frozen, so all information and the sleeping mode of the planet was activated, and that generates a lot of information and energy in the center, in the tropical region. So right now, because we have so much information going to the north and to the south, because the planet is in a heating process, so it's a lot of noise in our head. So if you think about the north planet, the north side of the planet, close to the North Pole, like the head of the planet, so we have too much noise. We have a lot of cares, a lot of thinking. So unless the planet is not frozen, we cannot be in a dreaming state. We cannot connect with the divine. And there's something very interesting about the ice. Um, Ice is basically a way in which hydrogen and oxygen storage information. So when the temperature goes down, what happens between the molecules is that they structure in the Metatron's cube. So they start to create information, and that's why you see every snowflake in a very different way. They are unique. So basically, it's like different words, different data that is being storage. So the more ice we have, the more connected to the information we are, and that's kind of the well, that's kind of the reason why an ice age would be so important for us to harvest information. And when the information is melting, so we get that information, but it's not there in the planet. It's not in Gaia. So it's basically confusing information. So for the Atlanteans, when they got closer to the ice, one of the main things that you can learn from the ice age is that they grab huge stones. The ice grabs huge stones and push it and leave it in places where they are not supposed to be. So you can see, for example, Stonehenge, like, oh, there's no stones here in the south of England. So why is Stonehenge or Avery or these kind of places having stones from the north of England or from the north of Wales or even from Ireland? So why these huge stones are there? So one of the probable reasons is that for thousands of years, the ice was pushing those stones until the place where they were supposed to be. So that taught the Atlanteans on how to move the stones, to which positions, to follow the ley lines, to follow where the ice was leaving information, the trace of the rivers, the trace of the water. Um, and it's a natural way in which the ancient ones learn the importance of moving stones from one point to the other. If the giants of ice, we have heard these myths so much about the giants of ice moving stones, the Niflheim for the North people, and then the Asgardian people coming from the stars, from another system, coming to push the ice back to claim the territory. So actually, it's describing the Ice Age in a very romantic way, but also how the consciousness of the planet was being modified by glaciation. So yeah, I find it fascinating to see that relationship with water and ice in the Atlantean traditions, because I always remember one thing that my grandfather in that life used to say, who was a teacher, and he used to say that that information is water and ice. So and we are jars. So when you have the right water inside, you have the right information. If you connect with the top of the mountain, you have the right information. If you don't have the right water or the right ice, so you are an empty jar. And the concept of empty jar was the biggest insult in Atlantean language. which was Garuk. So Garuk means empty jar, but actually was a very intense insult if you said something, if you say that to someone, because it means you have nothing inside. And so this relationship with the Ice Age and the Atlantean civilization was very connected, very tight. Yeah.
Fascinating. And of course, the empty vessel is still with us today. It's rather like saying my heart is as light as a feather, which of course, as you
Yeah.
and I know, goes all the way back into the process of the soul meeting the great master Thoth in the
Yeah.
halls of Mart.
Mhm.
Fascinating. And of course, the level of information that you have is inexhaustible, which is really fascinating. It just goes on and on and on. And it excites me to hear all of these ideas that you have being shared because I feel the authenticity, I feel the integrity within them. And they confirm many of the experiences that I've had over the years of meeting very remarkable people around the planet who are Sufi teachers, for example, in Egypt. Um, what I'm interested in also is on this note of water and the frozen nature of water, of how water for us is a representation of the feeling element within us, earth, water, air, fire, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen.
Mhm.
And I wonder if we could address the interior nature of what you remember within Atlantis,
Mm.
how feeling in the dream time, particularly, was stimulated as a rare degree of navigation process, navigation about our own lives, navigation about our communities at that time, and navigation about what was taking place within the Gaia.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, in as I said, in that time, the dreaming and the life was very connected. um, we had to dream awaken, which is to try to become like the animals, like the plants. So we needed to dream about gods. We needed to dream about so many things in order to connect with the actual power of everything. And that's one of the main what that's one of the main reasons why the main philosophy that came from Thoth, Jahuti, was everything is mind. So mentalism, the first law and the only law in the entire universe. And by law I don't mean that someone says it. By law I mean it's like the laws of physics, gravity, let's say.
Yeah.
So it's something that is written as it is. So um, when in that time we had this philosophy of everything is mind. So if you don't know how to navigate your own mind, then you're a bad sailor. Then you have no clue on how to move in this world, because whatever you see is going to be just what the waves wants for you to see. And that's what in other words we call unconscious today. So they call unconsciousness to all the waves in the sea, and then they call the conscious the navigator, the one that knows how to sail with the boat in the ocean of the mind. And so and everything that is under the sea, the things that you don't see, are the subconscious. So this subconscious is the power that is holding the waves. And then you have to know how to dive in the waves, or to use the boat to cross the ocean. And this point of view is very Atlantean. That's why they also rather to live in islands surrounded by water, so they could actually have their mind being constantly prepared on how do you navigate, on how do you sail, how do you see the ocean of the mind. And and so for us in that time, even if we were in a river, or in an island, we had this this connection with water as the vehicle to the mind of God. And that's why the baptism, let's say, the washing the body every day, constantly, to be inside the water, to be with the water, was something very important. Also, in some temples, you used to go into the sarcophagus with water, with a layer of water, so you can create conductivity. And actually, this is something that now I can understand better because of what hydrogen represents. Hydrogen is basically the sun. So when you connect with water, you're connecting with the light of the sun. So you are literally diving in the ocean of light. And the only thing is that is organized in a different way. That's something that I understand now. But in that time, it was all about the dreaming. It was all about the water that comes from the sky, comes from the same place that the light is coming from. So we connect with the same point of view, with the same vision. And that able a lot of the Atlantean culture to recognize that if you have the water inside, you have also the light inside. If you eat what the light is producing, what the soil is producing, you now have the product inside. You now have the power, the wisdom inside of you. You eat that animal, you have that information inside. You eat that plant, you have that information inside. So you just have to close your eyes to grasp all information. And the starting of meditation, the starting of alchemy, is basically the recognition that all those powers that we observe in the outside are in the within. So that creating the culture, the tradition of not only building the structures outside, but building the structures to create more power so we could access inside. And that's why the chambers and everything has to be dark, because you have to access the imagination. You have to access the mind. It was not about light. It was not about observing the beauty. It was about connecting with the deepest. And that's why in all the ancient places where you go, there are no windows in the temples. You have very, very hidden chambers with a lot of darkness, caves in the ground, going very deep inside the pyramid, because you shouldn't have any light, you shouldn't have any electricity, you shouldn't have anything of that, so you can actually connect with the mental, with the mind level, and use your own water, your own nitrogen, your own like basis of what we call earth, fire, air, and water. Actually, they represent the oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and carbon. So the four of them are creating what we are. So when you go into the mind state, you're actually diving the waves of those particles. And what you eat is nourishing the waves of the particles. And I find amazing that the word govern, to govern yourself, govern is a Greek word that represents navigation. So the one that navigates is the governant, is the one that knows how to lead. So if you know how to dive in your mind and learn how to navigate your own mind, then you govern yourself. And that was the main philosophy of all the Atlantean tradition.
Yeah, thank you. And you've mentioned the word mind a number of times, rather significantly. And the awareness that I have is that when we say mind today, we tend to just talk about the mental body.
Yeah.
But actually, the way that their consciousness, that our consciousness at that time functioned, was in the totality of what today we call holism.
Yeah.
That what is without is within, what is above is below. So it's the totality of consciousness working through a center.
Yeah,
a still
exactly.
point. And that still point is the key that we all have into the dream time, into the dreaming,
Hmm.
where we all connect with the collective unconscious. We all literally merge. And
Hmm.
there's this interesting theory about sleep, for example. And I don't know where this is now within the world of established science, but the belief that, or rather, let me rephrase, that science can't really tell us why we sleep, other than the fact that it is an essential cellular recovery.
Yeah.
So we can work on it on that plane in relation to the scientific model, or we can look into, well, what does sleep give us? And we were just talking about that really in relation to the nature of the ice age and how that becomes a hibernation period where REM slows down and we move into what we call today deep alpha or theta, where there
Hmm.
is an active level of consciousness, which is really what we're sort of moving into to discover
Yeah.
more about where is the alchemy of remembering? How can we
Hmm.
remember more rather than to fixate on ideas?
Yeah.
And I see you saying yes, 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 yes. So you're in flow with what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
remind everybody that it's not about, because all of my work is about getting people embodied because
Hmm.
the heart is the seat of the soul. If we can come back to the way that we
Yeah.
can live our lives through do as you would be done by kindness,
Mm.
empathy, compassion, love, or moral conduct, where we're actually kind to people, etc., etc., rather than fixating on purely and simply the ideas and the mental body.
Mm.
So, thank you for clarifying that.
I would say just to put this in another way too, um, that when I describe mind, uh, let's put it this way, it's like today we believe that mind is the operative system of a computer, for example. But actually, when I say mind, is the entire Wi-Fi, the internet that
Yeah,
is everywhere. So
yeah,
it's not the system. Like this here is the processor. So it's a processor of mind. The heart is a processor of mind. The intestines are a very important processor of mind too. So mind is all the waves of data that is creating everything, like the links and the information that is being pulsating between particles in the universe. So mind is everything, is not the brain. The brain
mm,
is just a computer trying to compute the mind. That's
mm,
the so that's why we have to shut the mind, the brain up. Like you have the shut it down. I mean, when you go to sleep or when you meditate, and that's why so many people say you have to put your mind in blank. Actually, it's not put the mind in blank, is to shut the operative system of your computing system down. So you can actually be in the actual mind.
yeah.
um, yeah.
Beautiful way of describing it. And of course, just to amplify what you're saying, well, because I realized that I hadn't quite finished not the story, but the suggestion that I was making about the world of
Mhm.
science not necessarily defining very accurately the importance of sleep. So there's a suggestion that's being made, particularly through our dear friend Carl Jung, was that when we move into deep sleep, we're moving back into the collective experience of our peoples, and
Mhm.
therefore not just of Homo sapien, but also of all the other species that we connect with. And that when we wake, we come back into separation,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
an interesting process for those people listening in. And how I have many people coming to me today and saying, well, not just today, I speak figuratively,
Yeah.
saying, is meditation important? Um, it's a good test for me to be patient. It's sort of like if we're not actually engaging, I'm sure you would concur with this, that if we're not engaging with that level of presence, with that
Mm.
level of deep, deep, deep slowing down our physiological processes, slowing down our electrical experiences, and moving into that finite conversation or infinite conversation between ourselves and that of our essence. It's the deep core of remembering, isn't it? And finding how that stillness can percolate through our bodies so that life
Yeah.
becomes easier in terms of the attainment of what we're here to attain, optimizing our creativity, full of love and
Yeah.
joy. And so, of course, you move into mentioning the master, as I
Mhm.
refer to Thoth or Jehuti. Um, Perhaps we should just define for those people who may not have experience of this extraordinary intelligence
Yeah.
of, if you can do it in a sentence. Who was this being? What is this being? Because we know this being is still with us, just not in
Yeah.
flesh at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I will connect it with what you were sharing about we are all in the unconscious when we are all together when we dream and then we separate again. Um, in the state of dreaming of mind that the Atlantean civilization achieved at one point is what actually allowed them to be connected uh, all around the world. Like they would speak in dreaming, they would speak in ceremonies with imagination, and
Mhm.
that's how most of them started to download information. So they didn't need a phone to contact the other one; they would just send information in the dreaming. So that's why the ideas are kind of the similar, but uh, but the maybe the shapes can be different, but the essence is kind of the same. And there were specific people that were constantly in that state of dreaming, even when they were awakened. And those were what we would call the masters, or the yeah the the actual priests of the civilization. There were people that constantly were in that state, and that's why we call them channelers. So they were a channel because they were becoming anything just because they were dreaming. So they were able to become the tree. They were able to become the lion. They were becoming everything because they just were an idea. They said, "I am an idea in this world." So Toph was one of those people that managed to say, if I am an idea, I can be in everyone's mind. And not everyone's mind, I can be in every stone. I can be in every tree. I can be in the entire planet. So in that moment, it was so easy for all of us to connect with the idea of someone. And it's very interesting because man, the word man in English means thought. And so a man is a thought. And I thought that this is very interesting that that also the word mind comes from man. So the idea of so what is a person? A person is an idea. So when an idea becomes so powerful, it becomes every man. So it becomes humanity. Yeah, so it's everything. And Toth was one of those alchemists of the mind that instead of just using the harvest of plants and animals and mixing them and creating the alchemy, he just dived into what are we harvesting in our minds? What is the light that we're harvesting, the sounds that we're harvesting, the images that we project? So in that, he became the master of mind. He became like the one writing the game of humanity because he described how to use the mind to connect with everything. And of course, this is a very tricky moment for the Atlantean civilization because that's when most of Atlanteans started to say, if we can access that power, then we can control mind. And how you control mind? Well, it's very easy through something that is to relegate every mind instead of remember every mind. And that's a very big difference. So when you remember, which was what Thoth was trying to do, you put all the members together. So you connect a network of mind that is very powerful. But if you, instead of remembering them, what you do is to relegate them, which is you tie them all to one mind. So what you create is control. And that's the origin of the word religion. So religion comes from religare, which is to tie the notes back. But all together, they are tied instead of being a member. They are tied to one instead of everyone being connected. So that's a very tricky, fine line in how do you control the minds of others through what you say, through what you see, through what you hear, or how do you remember everyone by listening correctly, by observing the reality correctly, by saying the words in a proper way. Um, so Thoth was giving the world the power to remember, and remember is not about the past. Remember is not about, oh, we have to remember what happened before. Remember is about consciousness. It's about how everyone recognize, oh, I am a thought, and if I am a thought, I am a man or a woman, yeah, which is the creator of a thought. That's a woman, the womb of a thought. So if a man or a woman becomes the idea. So now I become a network of ideas, which is consciousness.
Mm.
So that's why it's so important to remember um, who we are in all of this. Who am I? Where I come from? So I empower myself, I empower my thought, so I can be part of remembrance. I can be a member in all of this, a
Yeah.
memory in all of this.
Yeah.
Um, but Toth was one of the main designers of this culture that tried to empower that, and others they started to use his technology of the mind to control, to manipulate, to yeah to control people, so they can harvest more power through ideas. And and that's what we have today. Today, it's not about money. It's not about resources. It's all about ideas. Who controls your idea controls everything. And Thoth appears to many of us saying, "Remember, remember correctly. Go to the right alchemy of the mind." And yesterday, no, 2 days ago, I was meditating, and and uh, and suddenly I couldn't connect with anything, and the voice of Thoth came to me and said, "That's because you have your intestines full with stuff." So I was like, okay, what does it mean? And he said, the power of the mind comes from what you eat. So if you are full inside of you in your body, your mind cannot be free. And that's why culture is constantly telling you you have to eat here, eat this, eat this, eat this, sugar, salt, and blah blah, blah. And you connect with the people because you eat and so on. And suddenly it was like you cannot free your mind until you free your body, your intestines. And it was very interesting to understand that the mind is everywhere, and and how little things of culture are controlling us, not only in your mind but in what you eat, in what you feel, in everything that you perceive. So he describes this like the biggest of the games of the mind. It's the labyrinth of mind. um, and we are all in it, and some people are stuck in a corner, and some people are just running, not knowing where they go, not knowing that this is a labyrinth. And 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 Todd said, and I have been one of the builders of this labyrinth.
Yeah.
uh yeah.
Well, if we take the principle of control, because at the pinnacle point of all the ideas that you're sharing with us, there is the nature of control and how we're all waking up to the fact that the way that we've been educated, the way that we've been socialized, the way that we've been conditioned are really all very, very subtle aspects of the matrix that have led us into being controlled,
Mhm.
or in your case, in my case, of being free.
Mhm.
And when we move into a definition of what control is all about, if we're really in tune with the central aspect of our matrix, we begin to realize that we can't control a thing. It's an illusion. But what we can do is to manage.
Mhm.
Sounds
Yeah.
like really subtle semantics. But for example, because my so much of my life has been spent within the field of performance with
Mhm.
with, with great actors. Fortunately, I've worked with some great actors.
Yeah.
Uh, that the way that we manage this is through breath,
Mhm.
because the only way that you can actually give life to the people that you're playing from the interior part of your being is if the breath actually has a power to it, if it's recognized, if it's adored, if it's valued, if it's honored, if it's remembered. And
Mhm.
how we human beings, whatever language we speak, we always have enough breath for the thoughts that we speak. So by breathing in and then sharing the arc of the thought, because you're, as an actor, you're making borrowed words credible. You know, you're taking somebody else's words and making them your own words so that they're
Mhm.
believable. Because right at the core of great acting is a truth of feeling statement.
Yeah.
That if we're arcing through, particularly if we're speaking Shakespeare, for example, or writers of 400 years ago, which is obviously a very significant time in the explosion of literature on our
Mhm.
planet in North and Southern Hemisphere, that you can begin to see that they were breathing and thinking in much broader ways than we are today. That today
Yeah.
we're being encouraged to think in very, very short thoughts. Anyway, so just by way of illustration. But if
Yeah.
we go
Totally.
deeper into, for example, island culture and how we love to play with the waves
Mhm.
in island culture, whether it's through diving into them or surfing them, any great surfer will say that the most important thing is to have a toned musculature in the body to be able to stand on the surfboard, to wait for the remembering of how the wave carries you. So it's not that
Mhm.
we control the wave, it's the wave that manages us. And if we're in synchrony with that,
Mhm.
then we're automatically moving into that very powerful, infinite potential state of what it is to be a human being managing our lives. The same thing happens in horseback riding. You can't control a horse, but what you can do is manage yourself upon the horse. And if
Exactly.
you're,
Yeah.
if you're in sync, in synchrony with the horse, then the horse begins to
Hmm.
something remarkable takes place. We move into lovemaking, where this is a space where love is made. And I don't mean
Mhm.
sex. I mean this is a space where love is made.
Yes.
There's this very extraordinary unifying principle where the separateness of our member becomes part of the membership of our
Mhm.
communities, and this is really what the Atlanteans were living, isn't it, in relation
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
their cultural experience. Well,
Yeah,
so
the problem we have today sometimes is that people think that to be conscious, we have to get rid of unconsciousness,
Mm,
and we
mm,
have this fake war in our minds. Like it's like, how do we make the entire world to become conscious? And I say, if everyone becomes conscious, we all die. It's like there's nothing else. That's it.
mm,
And we have to understand that the holy trinity of mind, subconscious, unconscious, and conscious, they need to be in balance. Like the intestine, the heart, and the brain, they need to be in balance for us to exist. So as you said, it's not about the mind controlling the heart or the mind controlling the intestine. um, is about hearing each other, sensing each other, respecting the rhythms of each other, and and managing the energy. And I think that's the difference of control and managing, as you were saying, is to understand that that you don't have to overcome the other one, you have to tune with the other one. And that's the key of the symbiosis that we have in our planet. Everything is symbiotic. Like I used to say always, oxygen is a toxic chemical element, and we managed to transform ourselves so it becomes part of our life. But it doesn't change its toxicity. It is still a toxic element for most of the beings in the universe, but we evolved in a way that we adapted to dive in the oxygen. And so that is how we do it. Also saying about the Matrix, how many people think that Matrix is a bad thing and we have to get out of the Matrix? No, we have to understand that the Matrix is the womb, and of course we have to be born, but it doesn't mean that we have to kill our mother. So every time that we are born, so it means that we are just expanding ourselves from the Matrix, knowing that we are part of the Matrix. So we manage the power instead of being controlled by the mother. So I think this semantics, this way of pronouncing things, of knowing the etymology of things, knowing the actual power of the words, I think it's so important to release so many things in our perception, that's the freedom of the
Yeah.
mind that we are talking about.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because that's right at the core of I think it's brilliant because I know it's brilliant, but also because it's right at the very core of what I'm trying to empower people into understanding. That when we come to the word and we look into the essence of the word, particularly as you were saying, in terms of its etymology and its true meaning, as you were saying about matrix, coming from mater, as in the great mother,
Mm-hmm.
we have a huge remembering of the potentials that lie within us, and we begin to realize that the logos, the divine logos, exists within the word, and that logos literally means the intelligibility of the sound. How do we
Mm-hmm.
make sound intelligible if sound is at the very core of it? Which really leads us into more of what you share in relation to Huti, Thoth, for those people who are unfamiliar, that as soon as we move into sound, we realize that we're moving into a currency of force that
Mm.
is immensely transformative,
Yeah.
and that sound and light are very closely linked. Light, color, sound,
Yeah.
matter.
Same height.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, that light informs and that sound transforms. And of course, so much of what you're doing at the moment is alchemical.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing alchemy as a transformation of one state into another, which has often been referred to as transforming negative into positive, which
Mm.
is, for example, what our great trees are doing, that they're transforming negative into positive, they're transforming carbon into pure oxygen, and we call it
Mm.
photosynthesis. And therefore, I feel that, particularly as in the northern hemisphere, the trees are bare. I look out of this window, I have a vast window here. I'm surrounded by trees, and they're sentinels, that bring me energy from the cosmos. And now they're bare because there aren't any leaves on them. I see them in their nakedness as they go into deep sleep. So they're transmitting even more information to me through their sleep state rather than through their
Yeah.
wake state that they're in, in spring and summer. So if alchemy is a truly transformative process where we turn one thing into another, what do you feel your work is about today, or indeed for 2026? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're recording this on December the 27th. So we're in a really interesting juncture between the winter solstice on the 21st and the 12th night, which is very significant in
Mm-hmm.
most of our Christian and Judaistic religions. What do you see alchemy as being? What is the key alchemy that you wish to provide us all with in 2026?
Well, when I started to connect with Hermes, with Thoth, and he started to talk about alchemy, I thought about magic, and then he said, "No, alchemy is agriculture." And I was like, "Okay." And I went to a farm school. Uh, I went to a farm school when I was a
That's right.
kid, and I worked in the fields and yeah, all the time with plants and so it was like, oh, I'm coming back to my roots, which I left a long time ago. But he said, go back to your roots because alchemy is roots. And and the first thing that you cannot start alchemy through the flower. You have to start alchemy through the seed, and the seed goes into the dark
Mm.
space of soil, and you have to understand what are the powers that give the seed the force, the strength to grow. And the first thing that you do is to absorb those nutrients that are dead in the ground. And you have to go deep into the pressure of the darkness and to absorb all that information to then have the power to rise up to create your column, which is your branch and your trunk, and then start to blossom, and then the flower. And after the flower, when you open yourself and you allow every insect to come to you, because that's also another part of pollination. You cannot just be yourself. You depend on others to come and take your energy and spread it, and some of them will hurt you in that process. So it was like a whole process of of agriculture that he was leading me into. And he said, and then you have the fruit, but the fruit has no other purpose than to feed the seed again and to contain the seed. So your mind is the seed, the pineal gland is the pine. It said the pine seed that is within you. So all the process that you do in your life with your mind is exactly that, agriculture of mind. So you go through the darkness, you go through to the pressure, you understand the components that you have inside, you go back to your roots, and after that you absorb everything to grow. And so and the last thing you do is to blossom, to create the fruit that you are, just to contain the right seed again.
Mm.
And so it's very interesting because the word alchemy literally means black soil.
Mm.
It doesn't mean magic, it means black soil. And it's an
Mm.
Egyptian name referring to the chemistry that you do to produce fruits, to produce food, actually. Um, so when I started to receive this other point of view from what I expected from alchemy, um, he told me to walk everyone through a process of this chemistry and this harvesting of the seed. And and I find it amazing um, to walk step by step with everyone um, through this by showing my own process doing it.
Yeah.
And more than just telling the story is about how I am gonna be transforming and disappearing and becoming the seed and then the fruit and then maybe just uh, the manure in the fields. Um, so the way he described alchemy to me was um, so relatable to our daily life. It was about what you eat, what you breathe, what do you see, and it was very interesting about what you said about the eyes and what we listen and when we see. He was describing that we are observing a light that is not in the right angle because our position in the world is not the right one. So we have to heal the world, we have to find the right heel. he said. So put the heel in the right position and you will heal. And I love this play of mind because this play of words, uh, because we usually humanity is trying um, to live like happy and try to heal disease, heal from past lives, heal from whatever traumas and so on. But he said when everyone is trying to heal, what they do is give power to the disease. They give power to the conflict because we are not positioned in the right spot. We are expecting for us to be somewhere else. But the only way you can actually heal is when your heels are located in you, when you are standing in the right position. And he made me understand this with Dorothy in the
Yeah,
the
Wizard of
Wizard of
Oz.
Oz. Yeah, the Wizard of Oz. He said, clack the heels to go back home. Um, and the image of Hermes, which is the little wings on the
Yeah,
heels,
yeah.
is like the only thing that can take you home is when you are correctly in your heels, and you can and from there you can have the spectrum of observation, which is this. So you observe with your two eyes the right position of your location, and he calls it the geolocation of mind. So it's like the GPS of your
Mm,
brain. You
mm.
locate yourself in an axis, and then from there, you balance your eyes and your ears, what you hear. So he called it an eye for an eye, a boat for a boat. So an eye for an eye, like the story of the talion, the first law. An eye for an eye is not if you take an eye of me, I have to take an eye from you. An eye for an eye means that the two eyes needs to be balanced to observe the right position in where you are, because as you said, the eyes, the light, inform about everything that is happening. If you don't know how to balance your right and left, your two sides, your inner vision and your outer vision, if you don't know how to balance your two eyes, then you will always perceive a fake reality. You will always just receive information that is not the right one that you need to observe. And that's when people get stuck in a normal life that always see the same thing and they don't perceive the magic of it. And then those who we start to balance the eyes, you can see the magic of reality, and suddenly the right people comes and the right information and the right situations, and everything is like so magical. And it's like, how is possible that all of these things are happening to you? And I'm like, well, because I'm practicing constantly to see in a different way, to inform myself in a different way. And then what you hear, he said the other alchemy that is so important to nourish the pineal, the seed, is the frequency. And and it's very interesting, like the main technology in Atlantean times was sound, was music and words. And one of the reasons why was that is because all the data and the information that we have in our bodies is frequency based. So we are vibration, and the frequency of that vibration is the one that administrates data. So if you have oh constantly like that, it's one information. But if you have oh oh, you have a different kind of frequency. That's the frequency of in which you create a package of information. So if you add consonants to that, you create a package of data, which is now an idea. So the way you use the words, the way you pronounce them, the way you intend them when you say them, is shifting, transforming the minds of people. And that's the famous abracadabra, yeah, the hocus pocus. Is the famous I create as I speak. So all the ancient wisdom has that, with the shamans saying words, the singings of in ceremonies. Sometimes the words don't have to make sense in your language; they have to make sense for your brain. And he was saying that today everything that we hear, everything that we perceive from music and so on, it's in a frequency that doesn't allow you to break the spell of your consciousness.
Interesting.
uh, yeah, and everything that you see in TV, in YouTube, whatever, everything you hear in the music, in the news, or whatever you hear and you perceive is conditioning the seed, and transforming the alchemy that you are doing is not alchemy, it's just chemistry.
Mm.
So when you create just chemistry, there's no purpose, there's no meaning on it. You're just mixing stuff, and that's what keeps us trapped and controlled. But it's only on us. It's not someone trying to do it. Sometimes people, of course, do it on purpose, but the only reason why we get control is because we are not in tune. So he said that the preparation for the next years is going to be an alchemical journey on trying to balance that, on trying to process the sight, the hearing, and to balance eyes and words. And he said that there are many spells from it that we are defending them like if it's a virus in our system.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and we have to recalibrate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've just summed up the totality of what my life's work is
Good.
in sound, which is why the book had to be called The Alchemy of Voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's
So we're out of tune.
mm-hmm.
We're not in our note, but we each have a note. We each have a signature sound.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being is that everybody's here. So everybody's, it's all up here like this, So the rest of it, got to stabilize it because, and we all move at 950 miles an hour as a result.
Yeah.
But actually, and this is the fixation, of course, again on the intellect, on the doing. And most of the time, of course, we all know that we're not doing what we could be doing because they say so, whoever they may be, the memory of our parents or our teachers or pressure from peers and so forth. But if we move into the very core of our beings, if we move into the center of our being, we find our note. If words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears, said Rumi. So we need to come back into, but it starts, as you were saying, with being rooted. And it's interesting that, the work that I was introduced to in the 60s as an actor and the 70s, because for the 70s I worked as an actor, and then in the late 70s, early 80s, a huge opportunity came for me to move into being a voice coach through working with some very powerful people in the world, and then subsequently with actors. Get into the body, get rooted. Where is the position of balance within our bodies? This is going to be a very interesting project for 26. Of do we really feel grounded, and that we can take a moment to feel absolutely grounded through all of the information that's coming to us at the moment about grounding, about earthing, and using an external device to help us feel internally grounded, which is beautiful because we use external devices for this. But if it doesn't allow us to come back into that extraordinary sensual, sensory, sensate experience of what it is to have our heels balanced on the floor, then we're constantly leaning into the past and remeasuring the past rather than feeling ourselves pivoted between future and past. And that's where the true center of stillness is. That's where the true center of remembering who we are rather than being what the world wants us to be.
Exactly.
Amazing. And alchemia, all coming from Kemet, all coming from the black earth. So we go back into the core of the matrix. Well, your stream of information is just inexhaustible. It goes on and on and on and on, which is fascinating to hear. What do
I'm
you
glad it's
think?
useful.
Oh, it's more than useful. It's vastly valuable, to the point where it becomes, to mix words, invaluable, which means its value is more than valuable.
Mhm.
What do you see 2026 being for you?
Well, if we talk about stages of alchemy, I see Nigredo. Nigredo is the first stage of alchemy, which is to go to the black soil and to go to the darkness and the cave and to um, find all the nutrients that we usually think is the manure, the things that we call shit in in the common language. Um, all the deep things that sometimes we are like going against or we don't know. Basically, the weakest points that we have and that we have hidden in our darkness. So I think that 2026 for myself is going to be like this transformation of going towards that, trying uh, to recognize what is alchemy for myself, and share that with the world. Like, what is alchemy for me, as an example, not as a book, or something to say this is what alchemy is, but this is what alchemy is now for me. So, what is your alchemy? What is your way? Because we are all different seeds. So, not all the seeds need the same chemical elements to flourish. Um, so I think it's going to be a year of inner destruction so I can understand what is my power, what is my own. And there has been um, a lot of messages this year about the Achilles heel. What is your Achilles heel? And when you find your Achilles heel, um, you don't find just your weakness, you find your poison. And when you find your poison, then you know that right there you have the medicine. So to find the medicine for your own healing process, you have to go to the heel, to the weakest heel. And what is making you lose stability? As you were saying, like the most important thing to open your mind is where you put your feet. Where is your point of stability? So if you don't have acknowledgement of where are you standing, and most of us are standing in our uh, culture point of view or our mom or dad point of view, um, as you said, what society is expecting from us and not what we are. So so part of the alchemical journey of this next year for my own self, but I think for all the people that decides to join in this adventure, to join me in this adventure, it's gonna be about where are we standing, and if we recognize the soil, the land where we are standing, if it's stable, if it's not, what do we have to change from it? Maybe we have to walk backwards to find where we have started this journey. So it's going to be facing a lot of hidden things that we have that probably most of us we don't like, because a lot of people that are trying to search for spirituality or consciousness, um, they are poisoned with the idea of a utopia called paradise, and something that is actually an idea that cannot be fundamented in this reality unless we stand correctly. Um, and
Yes,
that's something.
you're saying two things, aren't you? The nurturing of the idea is something that we all have as human, because we're
Mhm.
all reaching through the mechanism of hope into a state of excellence or a state of perfection or a state that actually is a summation of beauty as an emanation of the divine. But what you're also saying is that in order to achieve that, we need to go deep inside and examine the whole nature of what our rootedness is all about. Is that not true?
Yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah.
For example, one of the things that I had to do, which for some people might be terrible, but for me, this was one of the main seeds that I did. Um, Hermes told me, um, "Where is your north?" He said, "Relocate your north." And and but to relocate your north, you have to go back to the south, where you come from,
Right.
because there's no north without the south. So
Right.
where is your south, where you are coming from, in order to find the north? So I've been diving into this concept. What does this mean? And then
Mm.
I understood that what is bringing me to the north? What is
Mm.
bringing me to the north is my blood, my heart, which is full of iron. So iron is the one that points north. So my heart, my
Mm.
blood is pointing to the north. But in the origin, where is my iron pointing at? And this is a funny thing in Spanish, of course, because in English it doesn't make sense. But in Spanish, uh, well, the chemical element of iron, it's written F and E, yeah, fe. So that's the way the chemistry talks about iron, fe, because it comes from Latin ferrum, yeah, hierro, ferrum. So, but the funny thing is that in Spanish, fe means faith.
Means faith.
Faith, yes. So where is your faith? And your faith points north. So wherever you have your faith is your north. So if you want to go to the right north, to the original north, then you cannot be attached to one faith. So I had to go back home in the south, in Argentina, and I talked to the priest in the church, and I said, I want the apostasy, which was like people around me was like, what is that? And because it's a very weird word that usually no one uses. And I said, I want the apostasy. Apostasy is when you leave a faith, when you leave the church in this case. So it's something that it's a legal thing, actually, that you have a paper and you have a seal and you have to sign and you have to explain why, and you have to have a conversation with a priest. So some people say, I just leave the church, but actually your faith is still in your iron, is still in yourself. So he said, to transform your chemical inside of you in your mind, you have to do the act of transforming that ferrum, that iron, to your north instead of the north of someone else. So I had to go there and explain to the priest, I'm not against the church. I'm not against Christians. I'm not living because I don't like it. I'm just living because I want to be there for all the North. I want to be there for everyone, in service to everything, not just in my heart with only one direction. So he loved that, and so we signed the paper, and this was like 2 weeks ago. And because I knew I had to start this process with it. But I also had to get rid of many of the things that I had in me, which were also a Buddhist thing, a Hindu thing, from the shamans in Colombia. So I had to get rid of many of the things that were attaching me to a faith. And so it was not only one of them. And I started my Christmas being in my own faith, uh, which is not a belief. It was my blood pointing at my north. And it was very interesting because for me was the first act that I took in the actual alchemy of transforming something from the origin, going back to the source of something that you might say, it's so in the past, it doesn't matter anymore. I just want to move on. But actually, to move on, sometimes we are pulling many things from the past that are not bad, but they are redirecting our direction.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's that's why it's so important to go backwards to move forward. Yeah.
Matthias, this has been the most amazing hour and a half. Thank you so much for sharing with such generosity and such ease all of these wonderful feelings and thinkings. And I wish you well with your refaithing self.
Thank you.
And I look forward to the next conversation. And for all of you out there in cyberspace, in the great mind of it all, how do we get in contact with Matthias?
Well, right now we have right now we just launched a website which is yosoy.red, like the color, but red is network in Spanish. So yosoy, which is I
So
am,
can you spell?
YOSOY.RED. So
.com.
there you have all information of everything that I'm doing the next years.
We will make sure that that's, oh, there we are.
There you are.
We will make sure, thank you, Ryan. We will make sure that that's there. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm being very loyal to you because I know that you have
Thank you
somewhere
so
to
much.
go. So I'm keeping my eye on the time. And it feels as though we've gone through a number of major cycles and reached a point of really beautiful completion. So for today, thank you very much indeed. And have a very happy new year.
Thank you, and you too.
I will. It's going to be a very exciting one. And to all of you out there, we, from the core of our hearts and the bottom of our souls, we say thank you for being here and have a happy, happy new year. And don't forget that this particular podcast is also linked through to theangelsofAtlantis.com. Yes, 12 angels who came to me about 40 years ago, who are helping me understand some of the quotients that are being shared by, there we are, by dear Matthias. Bless you, much love, take you on speedy wings, and the wings be on your or in your heels rather than in your back.
Yeah.
Much love. Thank you very much indeed. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you.